are back on the channel, Anthony Blackwell Jr., for another installment of some wrestling content for you guys. I'm joined by my dude here, BP, and we're going to be doing, as you see in the title, the history of Sting.
The icon, Sting.
The icon, Sting.
The guy who, just when you think he's out, he comes back in, Sting.
He finds a way. Absolutely finds a way. Now, I'm going to be completely honest.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't a huge Sting guy.
Well, good, because I was.
Yeah. I always, like, when I go back and watch him work, he's excellent.
Oh, yeah.
He's fantastic. He deserves everything he has by being considered one of the greats. He's unbelievable. But I feel a lot of his, for me anyway, his character development was very, what's catchy, I'm going to use it.
That, and he's like that, and I know you're not the biggest fan of this, he was, for early, especially early on in his career, he was very much the white meat, shake hands, kiss babies, baby face.
Yeah.
Which, when he was quote-unquote surfer Sting, even though surfing was never part of his thing.
He just had the bleach blonde hair.
Yeah, and he was from Venice Beach. Well,
yeah.
Him and Hogan were both billed from Venice Beach, California.
Yeah.
But, well, Sting was actually in California for a bit.
I probably would have, because I didn't like that style of character, I probably would have been into Sting more if I followed a lot of his career. Because as you know, if you guys follow along with Tornado Attack Podcast during its run, I wasn't a huge WCW guy.
Right.
I only watched WWE. And to me, I was also I loved pop culture. So when I would watch, like, when the movie The Crow came out, I was huge into The Crow. I loved it. And then I see a guy in WCW kind of like, it was like the wrestling trope, like, oh, you're just copying.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's exactly what they did, but that was always a thing in wrestling. The Road Warriors literally took their name from the movie Road Warrior, the Mad Max movies.
Yeah.
Demolition dressed like Humongous from that movie. Yeah, wrestling always took stuff from movies like that.
Yeah, and I guess as a kid, just being younger, I just never fell in love with it. Everybody else did, and like, I get how you can. His character during that era was iconic, which we'll get into. But like I said, I always just kind of was a step behind on Sting, and he also reminded me a lot of Bret Hart.
Really?
Yeah, I got a lot of Bret Hart vibes. I guess because their finisher.
Oh, well, yeah, well, Sting had it first.
Yeah.
Well, Hiroshi Hase had it first,
yeah.
But in the United States, Sting had it first.
Yeah, but yeah, we'll get into it. Let's dive into the history of Sting.
So, he's not a guy, Sting isn't a guy who had, like, the big amateur background or anything like that. He came from bodybuilding, like a lot of wrestlers in the 80s did. Hulk Hogan was always about train, say your prayers, take your vitamins, and he was always one of those guys, or he was one of those guys that came in through that world. And that's when we were scouting wrestlers at the time, because physique was what sold. People remembered Superstar Billy Graham, Ivan Putski. Like, that's where, if you saw a big guy at the gym who looked quasi-athletic and you were a wrestler in the wrestling business, you would say, hey, ever thought of wrestling? And Sting apparently saw a WWF show that came through California, Hogan, The Sheik, all those guys, and he kind of piqued his interest. And he winds up throwing the eye of this guy, Rick Bassman. Rick Bassman was in and out of wrestling through the years. He had the promotion in the 90s called UPW, which was actually a very briefly a developmental company. That's where John Heidenreich came out of. That's where Victoria, Lisa Marie Varon, she was there for a little bit. And it's actually where, even though he's seen as more of an OVW guy, that's where John Cena got his initial wrestling training.
Oh, wow.
Was in UPW. And Rick Bassman...
Sorry, real quick. Is it weird that I never seen Sting as a body guy? Like, when I seen older photos of Sting, I'm sure...
He was bigger when he was younger.
He was huge. He was a big dude. But it's so weird that, like, in wrestling, you have guys who are just, like, Hogan, and, you know what I mean? And, like, even Savage, like, you look back and he was huge, but, like, then you learn that he was only, like, 5'11".
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you're like, oh my god, okay, that's weird. And you kind of put it in comparison. But, like, seeing Sting in WCW and in the video games, he always just seemed like the average
he wasn't
body type.
He wasn't like muscle on top of muscle, and it didn't help.
He was cut up.
Yeah. He was always in great shape.
Yeah.
Especially when he was younger, but it also didn't help him as far as that goes, that he was so frequently connected with Lex Luger, they were legitimately the best of friends.
Which is another massive human.
Yeah, Luger was like Hogan, but he was in better shape than Hogan. He just didn't have Hogan's charisma.
Yep.
Because everybody thought Luger was going to be the next. So it was like, this is Hogan, but he
He's a pretty boy. He's not losing his hair.
Right.
He has the modern look.
Yeah, he works at more NWA style.
Yep.
But no, anyway, with Sting, when he starts as part of this thing called Power Team USA, which was him, Jim Hellwig, who would later on become the Ultimate Warrior, and two other guys. Bassman put this together, and I think for a while Sting was just called Flash. And they wound up going to Memphis. He got his first real start in Memphis Continental Wrestling Association, and they're heels. They're Power Team USA. It's Hellwig and Flash, or sometimes we'll call him Justice, Jim Justice or Jim Hellwig. And there's even like this one promo where basically this older, like just fat guy, Phil Hickerson, it just goes to Warrior. He's like, "You're on steroids." Basically, that's the whole promo. It's like, "You're on steroids, dude. Look at you." And
they actually say that during the Chikara tape, that episode where he's like,
yeah, somebody accuses Claudio of Icarus.
That guy's not passing a wellness test.
Yeah, the BDK a dozen drug tests or something like that. It's like, Claudio, I'm not sold that he was. I think he's natural.
Yeah, he's
just
strong,
he's a freak. He's just a physical freak. And so Power Team USA, Memphis, they don't last too long. Power Team USA is a concept, doesn't last too long. But Hellwig, Warrior, and Sting, Flash, they draw the eye of Bill Watts. Bill Watts is promoting right next door in Mid-South, which is Louisiana and Alabama, even in that area, the deep South. Even though it's called Mid-South, it's really the Deep South. And he brings them in. He brings in Warrior and Sting. Well, at this point, he's calling them Rock and Flash. And they're the Blade Runners. And that's where Flash becomes Sting. He becomes Sting in the at this point, they might even be called the UWF.
Yeah. Because
they were going national. They were trying to compete with Crockett in the NWA. They were trying to compete with WWF. They became the Universal Wrestling Federation.
For people watching, pardon my reach, my screen time's out. I want to see when it gets darker how it goes.
Yeah, it is. It looks good in the little monitor we have, but it is getting darker as we speak. So if you're watching the windows here, the sun will probably be setting quite a bit. But in the UWF, the Blade Runners are a team, and at this point, Bill Watts, he was one of those guys you needed to work. It wasn't like territories like WWF where you could be a not great in-ring wrestler, or not at least a decent in-ring wrestler, and pass the mustard. Even though Junkyard Dog was his biggest star ever, and Junkyard Dog is known as like a horrible wrestler in the ring, he was much better in Mid-South than he was when he got to WWF, and he started to... I think Dave Meltzer was called the junk food dog because his weight did start to balloon a little bit. And so Rock, Warrior, whatever you call him, he kind of doesn't make it in Mid-South. He actually goes to Texas and becomes a Dingo Warrior, which is basically the same thing as the Ultimate Warrior. The rest is history there. And Sting becomes Sting. He becomes part of a group called Hot Stuff Hyatt International.
Now he's still using, because him and Warrior had the similar face paint.
Yeah, well, he was using, at this point, the Blade Runners, it was very rudimentary. It wasn't colorful, really. He had the spiky blonde hair, and then he would also have, like, black paint around his eyes that would go down.
Yeah.
And it slowly started to turn in what we would know as a Sting face paint. It would be more around the eyes. And
so that was a thing, too, as a kid. I didn't know him and Warrior were buds, and I would look at Warrior, and then I would see Sting, and I was like, oh, he's just using Warrior's face paint.
Well, they're all...
What they
all owe a debt to Kiss.
Absolutely.
It all came from Kiss.
Absolutely, yeah.
And at that point, like, Motley Crue, even for a little bit, was wearing face paint. That Poison would wear face paint. It all came from Kiss.
Yeah.
It all was lifted right from them. And so he becomes part of Hot Stuff Hyatt International, which is Eddie Gilbert, who's one of the more brilliant wrestling minds of the time. I think he might even be helping Watts book at this point in the UWF. It's his group. Missy Hyatt is his wife, and they manage it together. But everybody kind of starts to see Sting, and they're like, and especially Eddie Gilbert's like, we've got something here. This guy could be a top-flight babyface, like a babyface you can build your company around if he gets a little better in the ring. But at this time, even though people praise Mid-South for their booking, they're losing a lot of stars. They lose the Junkyard Dog to WWF. They lose Ted DiBiase to WWF. And Dr. Death Steve Williams is doing a lot in Japan. He's doing stuff with Crockett. They're losing a lot of their top stars. And what really dooms that territory Actually, I think Dr. Death was still with him to the end. But what dooms that territory is just economics. They are in, like I said, Louisiana, even eastern Texas, Arkansas, that area. And that area was really dependent, their economy was really dependent on oil. And the oil market dried up, and that area hit a deep, deep recession in the mid to late 80s, and people couldn't afford to go to wrestling anymore. So what winds up happening, long story short, too late, is Bill Watts sells the UWF to Jim Crockett Promotions. They do an angle where UWF becomes part of the show. They say they're going to run it separately. And if people are skeptical about the Ring of Honor AEW thing, this is why. Whenever this happens, the company that is bought by the company that buys them, and they try to do a us versus them angle, almost always they
bear the other promotion.
They will make the promotion that got bought look weak.
Yeah.
Just because they don't want to put the promotion that they just took over.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the UWF guys aren't really pushed that well, and a lot of them leave. Terry Taylor leaves to be the Red Rooster in the WWF, and the one guy they're saying, hey, we've got something here, is Sting. So they kind of separate him from Eddie Gilbert a little bit. They put him in a big six-man with the Freebirds, but they're going to make him a singles babyface. I think he already was a babyface coming over, but they're going to make him one now for sure. And the big moment, the moment that you're like, Sting's a player now, Sting is for real, is the very first Clash of the Champions, which was a big event on free TV, not pay-per-view, not closed circuit, but it's a little bit bigger, it's more special than your regular TV. It's him and Ric Flair, 45 minutes, in a draw is the main event of the first Clash of the Champions. Sting gets his title shot, but it's a draw. I think they even had judges, but one judge had it for Flair, one judge had it for Sting, and one judge had it as a draw. So even though they had judges, it was still a draw.
Yeah.
Because that's how you build your rematch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that stuff works really well back then, is because there is TV and there is that, but it's not like wrestling is so sparring, like you only get like one a month or maybe a weekly television, but it's not like it is now where it's just like there's so much to consume, there's so much you can watch back catalog. Like you have to work hard to be a wrestling fan.
Well, back then you did have weekly TV, and they had like 2 or 3 weekly shows. You had their Saturday night show, which was just called World Championship Wrestling at the time.
But not everyone in the country's getting it either.
No, it was on cable.
Was it?
Yeah, but
I thought the Mid-South only went so far, and the Northern Territories didn't get it.
There's syndicated shows like Worldwide. Not everybody got it. Not everybody got TBS. If you got TBS, you got it. Like I know up here, I think from what I've heard, is I remember talking to our buddy Andy Header about this.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, we didn't get WCW up here until like 1994 or so, because you didn't get TBS.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you didn't get the channel, you didn't get the channel. Like kind of now, I'm in a situation where I have YouTube TV. I don't get access. I can't watch Impact.
Yeah.
But it was fairly big. But you got to remember, TV back then and TV now were very different. Until Monday Nitro really changed the game. 95% of your TV matches back in the day were squash matches, and you might get like one thing, like the show now that's probably the most most TV back then would be like Dark Elevation with more angles, and then you would have like John Moxley would probably wrestle somebody like who's like a mid-card heel. Yeah, your main event for like an AEW.
He's wrestling Daddy Magic.
Yeah, or like Ethan Page. It'd be like John Moxley and Ethan Page is your main event. But you wouldn't have like these pay-per-view quality matches on TV, and if you did, it was once in a blue moon. And it was usually because the guy was going out on the territory, so he didn't care if you lost on TV.
Yeah.
Because the idea is if you lost on TV to a guy that was seen as the same level as you, you were dead.
Yep.
Like you didn't want people losing on TV a lot. So Sting they're going to do a slow burn with Sting because Ric Flair is going to do a program with Ricky Steamboat, who just got freed from the WWF. So Sting beats Mike Rotunda, who is IRS, Bray Wyatt, and Bo Dallas's dad. Sting beats him for the TV title. That's his first big singles title. But the plan is kind of seemingly in place that Sting is going to be the guy at some point. So Flair does his thing with Steamboat. Flair turns babyface for a very short time. Flair feuds with Terry Funk. That's basically the only feud Flair does as a babyface. That leads into the first Halloween Havoc, where it's Funk and the Great Muta against Flair and Sting as your main event. So you have Sting positioned right under Flair as the number 2 babyface, because Steamboat's on his way out already. So it's, and Sting's feuding with Muta. He lost the TV title to Muta because they don't want the TV title on him. So Flair and Sting beat Muta and Funk. Flair beats Funk in the I Quit match. That's the end of that feud. Funk's on his way out again. So now it's a whole thing that's happening too, where at this point, this is late 1989, one of the big reasons they turned Flair back heel is because the Brainbusters, Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, were in the WWF, but now they're leaving, and they're going to come back to... They want to get the 4 Horsemen back together. Ole Anderson is, I think, the booker at this point, because Dusty's gone. Dusty's in WWF. And so Ole's the booker, and he's like, let's put the Horsemen back together. I'll be their manager. And they wanted to be very close to the original lineup. Flair, Arn, Tully, Ole, and Ole's just going to be a non-participant, because at this point Barry Windham is also, I think, in the WWE. I think this is a short run as the Widowmaker, because Barry Windham would be your 4th if Ole's not going to wrestle. The only problem with that is Tully fails a drug test. Tully Blanchard fails a drug test, and Turner decides we don't want to hire him. And then they're like, we'll hire Arn, but we're going to hire Arn at half the money because he's not going to be with Tully. But Arn reluctantly agrees. But it's like, okay, well, we got to turn Flair heel now. The Horseman's not going to work as baby faces. So they do a thing at Starrcade. It's a round-robin tournament where it's to declare the Iron Man. It's like your top 4 singles wrestlers. It's Flair, I believe, Luger, Sting, and Great Muta. And Sting beats Flair at the end. And it's non-title, but he gets a chance at the title. So the whole thing happens where the Horsemen come back, but they're like, Sting, you have to give up this title shot against Flair. Flair's the man if you're a Horseman, because they bring Sting into the Horseman. And they say, if you're going to be a Horseman, you can't challenge Rick. You got to give up your title shot. Flair's the man. Your job is to protect the title, not try to take it from him.
Yeah.
So Sting's like, well, thank you for the opportunity, but I don't want to be a Horseman. I want to be the world champion. So they jump Sting in the parking lot. And they do the whole turn. I think this is Clash of the Champions 10. It's one of the, like, 9 or 10, somewhere around there. And at the end, there's a cage match where even though the Horsemen are, it's, I believe it's Flair, Arn, and Ole may have even wrestled here. I don't remember who their partner was. Or it may have been a babyface, but it's basically, even though the Horsemen are wrestling heels, they're getting booed because they just jumped Sting.
Yeah.
And there's a thing where there's a beatdown and Sting's trying to get to the cage to save. And he's climbing the cage, and they're going to pull him out. Doug Dillinger, the head of security there, is going to pull him out. And something happens where Sting blows out his knee, and he's out for a while. He's out for like 6 months. Because I think the plan was right after that to go right to Sting. To go right to Sting as your champion. But now Sting's on the shelf for a little bit. That's when they do the thing with like Sting and RoboCop at Capital Combat. But eventually it all comes together that Sting is going to be defeating Ric Flair. We did this on the Tornado Tag, like toward the end. One of the last shows we did, right before Legends of Hamburg, the last time we had Ryan Vox on, we did Clash of the Champions 90 where Sting wins the title. That is the culmination. That's Sting right back from the injury. He's finally getting his title shot, and he beats Ric Flair.
That's his first world title shot.
That's his first world title win.
Yeah.
The first shot was the draw, the first Clash of the Champions. And so Sting's a champion now, and he's still feuding with the Horsemen a little bit. He wrestles Sid, because now the Horseman is Flair, Arn, Barry Windham is back from WWF, and they take Sid out of the skyscrapers and put him with the Horseman because he's red hot.
Now, just from what I remember from the Great American Bash, like, and maybe I'm just, like I said, an outsider who didn't watch the product, but I always felt like Sting was partnered with somebody who would either demand more attention than Sting, and Sting was always cool just laying back, or they partnered up with people who were just like so not good, and Sting was like the main draw of the team, but the rest of the team was kind of
Yeah, and they didn't really have a good babyface bench. Sometimes you'd be with the Road Warriors. The only person was really like a single guy that would be on his level. At that point, the Road Warriors were in WWF. The only person at that point who would really be seen as on Sting's level, like Sid? 1 and 1A. No, they were always opposite. Sid was always a heel. Yeah. Sting was always a babyface.
I thought Sid was on his team for a moment there.
Not that I remember.
Oh no, Sid came out and beat up Gonzalez, right? Who did Sid attack in that and everyone went nuts? Or was I thinking of a completely different show? Am I blending things together?
Sid was a heel that got a babyface reaction.
Yeah.
Sid and Gonzalez, or Elegante, was on Sting's side. Basically, they put together the dudes with attitudes, and I think Luger was still. They kind of try to keep Luger separate, but it'd be like Sting, Paul Orndorff, the Junkyard Dog, Elegante. Yeah, it was kind of a motley crew of people. It wasn't. They didn't have the best like.
You look at the Four Horsemen, and then you look at like the NWO when he went against them, and then like when he was put on a good babyface team, it was like him, Hogan, Savage.
Yeah,
Luke,
it was like an all-star team.
And he would always kind of like fall second place. I mean, the diehard WCW people, to them, it was like Sting's the #1 guy.
Yeah, like at that point, if you're gonna put like a babyface foursome against like the best babyface foursome to put against the Horsemen would have been Sting, Luger, and the Steiner Brothers.
Yeah. But like as a WWE guy, you're looking at that, you're like, oh well, that's Hogan and Macho Man. It goes Hogan, Macho Man, you know what I mean? It's weird depending on who you draw the line in the sand for what company, I guess. Yeah.
And then usually, if you have somebody with your #1 babyface is like their right-hand guy, that's the guy that's going to turn on him, and that's going to be your next feud. That's what they did with Hogan and Savage. Like the Mega Powers only existed so Savage could turn heel and be Hogan's friend that he fused with. It was the same thing they did with Paul Orndorff. It's the same thing we did with Bruno Sammartino and Larry Zbyszko. It's a tale as old as time.
Yeah.
And so Sting is still kind of feuding with the Horsemen. He wrestles Sid. His first big pay-per-view title defense at Halloween Havoc is against Sid. And they do a thing where they fight to the back, and then Sting comes back out, but Sting is now like 3 or 4 inches taller, and he's a little more pudgy, and he gets beat. And then Sting runs out, and this is the first time we ever have a fake Sting because it's Barry Windham. The Horsemen trying to like pull one over on him. Sting comes out like rope around his arms, like they tied him up in the back, and then a fake, like Barry Windham was going to be the fake Sting and let Sid win the title. But as this is happening, Sting is also being kind of haunted, plagued by the Black Scorpion. And the Black Scorpion is a hooded figure who has he has a Shockmaster voice. It's like Ole Anderson with a voice deep, like Sting. Remember, like New Orleans, 1987. And like the fantasy booking at like if social media at the time, be like everybody like, well, it's somebody from Sting's past. It's got to be the Ultimate Warrior. They must have gotten him out of his contract. But no, they were never going to get the Warrior. The Warrior was the WWF champion at the time.
Yeah.
And so it's what Vince Russo would later call, Red Ferraro would later call rainy day booking, where they have this guy, we're going to have this mystery guy that's stalking Sting, but we don't know who we want to make it. And there was an idea it was going to be like the Angel of Death, but nobody really cared. Nobody knew who the Angel of Death was. Like, he actually was one of the Black Scorpions, had like 10 of them.
Yeah. Like,
different people played the character. And eventually it's like, well, we got to get somebody. So
at this time, is he using the Scorpion Deathlock?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was always his big move. Stinger Splash, Scorpion Deathlock.
And what was the inverted DDT?
He didn't. That was later. That was when he was the Crow Sting.
Okay.
That was a Scorpion Death drop.
Yeah.
But Sting, his big finisher, sometimes he would win a match by a flying clothesline. Like that. Those were his big moves. And so Sting, it's finally settled. It's going to be Sting against the Black Scorpion at Starrcade, which is WCW's WrestleMania. Starrcade 91. Or Starrcade 90, rather. Sting against the Black Scorpion. And Sting beats the Black Scorpion. He unmasks him, and it's Ric Flair. And the legend is, like, Ric Flair only agreed to do this if he would.
This guy.
He would be. Yeah, we have a crazy driver in front of us here.
Fucking Fast and Furious.
Yeah, he's changing lanes left and right in a big hurry.
Going nowhere.
Going nowhere. So the rumor is that Sting or Flair only agreed to be the Black Scorpion and lose this match at Starrcade if he got the title back. And lo and behold, that's exactly what he does. And Flair wins the title back at a house show at the Meadowlands in early 1991. And this is around the time that is shifting from the NWA title to the WCW title. They're cutting ties completely with the NWA. And so Sting...
And they're using Big Gold currently.
At this point, yes, they're using the Big Gold belt.
Sting had Big Gold in that show.
But Big Gold's about to go away, and you're going to get the
gross belt.
Well, that was when Flair leaves. Flair leaves about 6 months after this. And Sting kind of goes down the card a little bit. His run as a champion wasn't the best business-wise. and they're running with Flair at the top now. And Sting feuds with Nikita Koloff, who just came back for a little bit, and then Flair winds up leaving that summer. He has a contract dispute, and they want him to drop the title, though I believe that they initially want him to drop it to Luger, or Barry Windham, like whoever. Just drop it to whoever you want.
It's so crazy to me, like, just looking at this timeline, and everybody and their brother is jumping back and forth.
Yeah.
Everyone's willing to dip, and Sting never wavers, never falters.
Well, you never had at this point, and also at this point, you don't have guaranteed contracts. Usually it's the first... Actually, you do have guaranteed contracts in WCW, but you don't in WWF. So people were leaving WWF more because you could just say, I'm giving my notice, I'm done in 30 days. Because they wouldn't guarantee you any money. You came to WWF, like, people probably made more money there, but there was like, you're gonna get an opportunity, you're gonna get paid off the house, you're gonna get paid off your merch, you're gonna get paid off pay-per-view buys. Where WCW is like, you're gonna get paid a set amount, you're gonna get paid $200,000 a year, no matter how well you do or no matter how poorly you do, you're locked in at this price.
Yeah.
But it was a guaranteed contract, and that's, some people like that.
But he never, I feel like hearing this, it's like, oh, well, you're gonna drop to this guy or this guy. Like, you would think for his loyalty to the company, he'd be the guy, he'd be your Okada, he'd be holding it for 10 years.
The idea was always, you never had a long-term babyface champion with the NWA or WCW. They would do it a little later with Hogan, but they were always built around the money is in the chase. If you're a babyface, you can't be the champion for too long because people aren't paying to see the babyface.
How many times is Sting a world champion?
A lot.
Really?
Because
is he close to 16?
No. I can't think offhand how many times, but so he has a few feuds. He winds up feuding with Rick Rude for a little bit over the U.S. title, and then Luger winds up winning the title after Flair leaves in mid-91, and he turns heel, but then Luger's on the way out too, because WCW is very poorly run at this point too. So Sting beats Luger in early 92 at Super Brawl 2, and he beats Luger on Luger's way out. He's a champion again. But again, the money's in the chase. That's the way they think. And Bill Watts is coming in. Bill Watts was a heel champion, and he has Sting drop it very quickly. After maybe 4 months as champion, he drops it to Vader.
Wow.
And now Vader, but then Vader drops it to Ron Simmons right after, because Bill Watts wanted to build a new babyface, so he's building up Ron Simmons.
Crazy.
But the night that Ron Simmons wins the title in Baltimore, the original build match for that night for the title is going to be Vader defending against Sting. And they do a thing where Jake Roberts, who had just left WWF, DDT Sting and injures him. And that's how Sting gets put out of the match. And that's when you get the spin the wheel, make the deal match. The first one, he has his feud with Jake. It doesn't last long. Jake's there, in and out. And Sting and Vader was your big program for a little bit. I think Sting actually won the title during a European tour, but lost it right back. But yeah, Sting, after that second title run, is largely out of the picture because Vader drops the title after he wins it back from Simmons.
Electric moment in wrestling.
What's that?
Ron Simmons winning the title.
Oh yeah, great moment.
That's
because after Sting's hurt, they get all the baby faces like, we're gonna pull a name out of the hat, and that's who's gonna wrestle Vader, and it's Ron Simmons.
That place went fucking bananas.
Yeah, oh yeah, it was amazing because nobody expected it. Nobody expected it. It'd be like if they did Kevin Owens against Roman on Raw and Kevin wins. People would go nuts because nobody expects it and people love Kevin Owens.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with Ron Simmons. So yeah, Sting kind of it would be unfair to say he's in the mid-card because he really was a #1 babyface, maybe #2 behind Flair. But then there was also this weird part where there's kind of 2 world titles. Because after Flair leaves...
Can you say in today's times he is, without changing character, he's sitting in like a Seth Rollins spot.
Yeah.
Where no matter who you put him against, win or lose, nothing's gonna hurt him because he's a character. He's as good as he is. Yeah. But he's always seemed like at any point in time you could always pull the trigger and put him as a world champion. Yeah,
he's the Undertaker. He's Seth Rollins.
Yeah.
Not the Undertaker now. The Undertaker's retired. But yeah, he's that guy. But he's always going to be Sting. He's always going to be the guy that you can plug into the main event and it's going to work.
Yep, it's believable because he's so good.
And they also do some things where he was the U.S. champion for a minute, and then he had the international title, which was the big gold belt. But for a while, you had they made up this phony thing called like WCW International because they couldn't call it the NWA title anymore. So they would say like recognized by WCW International as the world champion. Usually it was Rick Rude. Rick Rude was the guy who had that title the most. But when Rick Rude had his career-ending injury, Sting beat Vader for the held-up title. I was actually at that show. And then they do the unification match where it's Sting against Flair, and they're both baby faces, but Flair turns heel and wins the unified title because Hogan's here. And that's when Sting kind of gets slotted firmly under Hogan. So he's firmly under Hogan. If Hogan's there, and this is pre-NWO.
Is this now, because Hogan's there, this is early stages of when Nitro's starting?
Yeah. Well, Hogan was there for about a year before Nitro, a little over a year before Nitro starts. Okay. Saturday Night's still their big show, but it's usually Hogan's in your main event, and Sting's the guy that's, like, if Hogan needs help, until Randy Savage gets there, it's Sting.
Yeah, you're the buddy.
Yeah. And he had some weird he had feuds with like Big Bubba Rogers.
Has Sting ever said anything negative, positive? His thoughts on his run at this time, or? I
don't think he was a guy that was like that, had that kind of ego. Like, I need to always win my matches. Not everybody's like that. No, not everybody's Shawn Michaels. Not everybody's like, I don't want to lose. That's not everybody.
I love how you throw Shawn. Yeah, you always throw Shawn. I mean, Bret did it too.
Once. Shawn did it his whole career. Actually, Sting's not Hogan, because that was always Hogan. Sting's not Hogan. They're wired differently. Sting's a business guy. Oh, the check cleared? Oh, whatever you want.
Yeah.
Let's do it. And he always had a good position. At this point, he's also kind of looking at other opportunities. Hogan gets him a gig on Thunder in Paradise, which was his his like Baywatch with a boat show.
Yeah.
And
everybody was on that.
And in '95, he's the U.S. champion for a while. The title was held up, and he wins the tournament for it. He's on Hogan's team in War Games, Hogan, Sting, Savage, and he's always in the mix. He's always in the mix, but he's always firmly below Hogan. So he's never gonna eclipse Hogan. And then that's pretty much a holding pattern until the NWO. And then they do the thing with the fake Sting, and everybody, his best friends, Luger. They had a really fun thing in the early Nitro days where Luger was obviously this untrustworthy asshole. He was a heel, but he was still friends with Sting because Sting was his best buddy, and Sting always gave him the benefit of the doubt. But Savage hated him. Hogan was like, you can't trust Luger. Sting's like, no, it's fine. I know Lex. And it's like, Lex is obviously a piece of shit. But yeah, so that's kind of his holding pattern. He's number 2 babyface, and he's locked in because Hogan's not going to be anything but number 1.
Yeah.
So that's until Hogan turns heel, and now it's like, well, what do we do with Sting?
Now, originally, the third member was going to be Sting.
I think they always wanted Hogan. Sting was the backup plan.
If Hogan didn't want to do it until he heard it was going to be offered to Sting, then he jumped on it. Is what they always say in like the documentaries.
I don't know if that's the case. I know they all there was talk that they wanted Bret Hart, but Bret Hart wasn't even under contract to them.
Yeah.
And then Hogan was the no-brainer. And Sting was I was actually subscribed to the Torch, the Pro Wrestling Torch at the time, and the reports at first were it was going to be Luger, but like that wouldn't have gotten over.
Yeah, Luger's like Big Show at this point. He's flipping every other.
Yeah, kind of is a heel.
Yeah,
but Sting was never the heel. Sting would have been the ultimate guy to turn his back on WCW, and that was the backup plan because they knew Sting would do it. But then Hogan wound up doing the rest of history to get the NWO, and then they have Sting join, but it's not really Sting, it's a fake Sting, and Sting is pissed off about it, and that's when he sits in the rafters for a year and a half and is more over than he's ever been.
Now that's when the Crow Sting shows up?
Yeah, like he does at this point he was already, like, he didn't have the spiky blonde hair anymore, he was growing his hair out, and it was darker, but he still had like the very colorful gear, the colorful face paint. And the night after the War Games where he shows it was a fake Sting and he walks out on everybody, he does a promo with his back to the camera, like you all turn your back on me, I'm turning my back on WCW, was basically the gist of it.
Yeah.
And after that promo, he's gone for a while, and you see him sitting up in the crowd, and he's got the black and white face paint. This stuff he still uses to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And that very slowly builds, because they dragged this out. That was late. That was like October of '96. They do that.
Sorry, I keep reaching into the camera. I want to just double check the lights. Good. This little light's kicking ass,
Yeah,
by the way.
That's October of '96. They do that, and Sting stays up in the rafters pretty much, and barely wrestles. Very occasionally wrestles until Starrcade, which is December of '97.
Wait, how long is he doing this?
Over a year.
Wow.
Like, he would drop down, like, they wouldn't do this after the Owen Hart thing, but he would drop down on, like, a line, and sometimes he would go after WCW guys, sometimes he'd go after NWO guys, sometimes he'd go after everybody.
Wasn't the whole thing with the Owen drop down, like, thing was kind of modeled, like, the company who was doing it, Vince wanted to kind of do what Sting did, because he was so quick to come down, but release quick, and that's kind of what, like, malfunction-wise, was an issue with Owen.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But then, as far as that goes, it's built up to the big thing with Sting and Hogan at Starrcade. Hogan's been the champion besides like a 6-day Lex Luger run. Hogan's been the champion for a year and a half. NWO's been dominant. And everybody's like, oh, well, this is a no-brainer. Sting's going to easily win. But this is right after the Montreal Screwjob, and they've got Bret Hart, so they get in their head like, we should do a messed up finish where it looks like Hogan screwed Sting, and Bret Hart comes out and says, that's not going to fly, I'm not going to let that happen, and they restart the match, and then Sting wins. So the idea is that Nick Patrick, who was at one point the NWO referee, but then he kind of came back because they kicked him out, but he's still kind of screwy, is supposed to do a fast count. And if you watch Starrcade '97, it is the slowest fast count you'll ever see in your life. It's 1, 2, 3. It is not a fast count at all, so it just looks like Hogan beat Sting clean.
Yeah.
And people think like Hogan was like, look,
Hogan,
brother, don't do a fast count, do a regular count.
Do this for me, brother.
Yeah.
Let it there fall.
So there's never been a better politician. Actually, might be one guy that's better. But to that point, there's never been a better politician than Hulk Hogan.
Who's better?
Triple H.
Oh, well, yeah. Yeah, he put himself in a nice position.
Oh yeah. So this leads to like turmoil over the title. So the title gets held up. They do a match at Super Brawl the next year in '98. Sting wins the title, but he loses it to Randy Savage a few months later. He never had long title runs ever. And I think he had a few more later on. Like the WCW title, once Vince Russo gets involved, gets so convoluted that it's just good luck. It's a shell game. So then you have shortly after that, after he loses the title.
Is when you have like DDP, Arquette, Jeff Jarrett?
Yeah. Well, no, that's a few years later.
Oh, okay.
'98, Sting loses it to Savage. Savage loses it the next night to guess who? Hogan. And at this point, the NWO was starting to fall apart, and WCW was starting to lose ground. WWF was surging ahead. Well, actually, '98 it was kind of back and forth. It was neck and neck for a while. Like the last Nitro that beat Raw in the ratings was October of '98.
Okay.
So the summer '98, it's
and we're
neck
still
and neck
black
for a while.
and white, right? Black and white. Wolfpack is not.
The Wolfpack is a thing now.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
So what exactly? Like, all right. So how does, just for like storyline purposes, how does the Wolfpack enter this, and then how does Sting become a Wolfpack member?
Because Kevin Nash and Scott Hall weren't seeing eye to eye with Hogan, so the NWO starts to fracture.
Which is almost like legit, right?
No, it was 100% legit. Yeah. Like, because they're like, so you have the black and white, which is Hogan, Scott Steiner. I'm trying to think back to the WCW NWO Revenge game on who's on which side. I think Scott Norton was black and white, and like a lot of your core NWO guys are black and white, except for the black and red NWO was mainly people who were really backstage friendly with Nash and Hall.
Yeah, Scott and Kevin,
Scott was back and forth.
Scott and Kevin were like, everyone's black and gold, this is getting boring.
Black and white, yeah.
Yeah, black and white. Now let's make Wolfpack.
Well, Scott Hall was a Wolfpack most of the time, because Scott Hall he was having a lot of problems, so he was in and out, but he would feud with Nash a lot because they wanted to work together.
Yeah.
But you had like in the black and red, Savage joined the Wolfpack because he kind of did the thing where he was feuding with Hogan.
Everyone had black and white gear, and everyone had black and red gear.
Well, yeah, you were either NWO Hollywood, which is black and white, or NWO Wolfpack, which is black and red, and your main guys were, and then people who were WCW the whole way through started joining the Wolfpack, like Sting,
Yeah.
like Lex Luger, and like WCW, like besides Diamond Dallas Page, there weren't a lot of top tier guys who were, oh, I'm still with WCW. Yeah, I think it was like DDP and then Bret Hart. Oh no, Bret Hart I think actually joined the Black and White after a little bit. Ric Flair, the Horseman, never really got involved. But with Sting, at this point, I think he's doing a lot of team with Luger. Again, he shuffled back down on the mid-card. And eventually, like, Vince Russo comes in '99, and Sting turns heel. He's a champion for a little bit, but then he's not the champion. And then he's eventually feuding with Vampiro. And
I like the Vampiro feud.
And then, like, ICP gets involved. The Great Muta was there for a minute. Yeah, it was the Dark Carnival was the whole thing there.
I hate that.
But
never seen it, but I probably hate it.
That's when they had. I know people have asked us to review the Human Torch match.
Yeah.
Where like, because Vince Russo, as soon as he comes in, they have to get a Titantron like WWF does, and so they put. They had a thing where it was like a torch on top of the big. They called it the Turnertron.
I need to get in this lane. This guy's slow.
I'm gonna be quiet here so you can drive.
No, you're good. You're good.
So yeah, it was a whole thing where you have to. You basically win by setting the other guy on fire. So they go up to the top of the thing, and obviously Sting goes down, and a stunt Sting gets set on fire and does a dive onto a crash pad. And that's basically how they handle it. And Sting kind of is on and off TV until WCW closes. I don't think you're supposed to take this exit.
Nope. Sometimes this GPS thing pisses me off. Well, we have more time because what I'm thinking is we'll make this up until well,
WCW is about to close.
Yeah,
so we're gonna cut it off there.
We'll end it when WCW closes, and then we'll pick up Sting, his WWE and AEW run.
Okay. Well, there's a. If you're talking Sting, Impact, Impact is a huge part of it.
We'll do Impact. We'll do Impact WWE. Well, Impact WWE AEW in this in like a second installment. Yeah. So I think what we're gonna do is we'll make this a two-parter. Yeah. Because I want to keep these around like 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay. Well, that's about the end of Sting as a major player in WCW.
Yeah. So let's roll to that.
Yeah. There's a few comebacks here and there, and then the big thing, obviously, they keep teasing Sting's going to come back toward the end because one of your big things at the very, very end of WCW, you're talking like 2000 into 2001, is a group called the Magnificent Seven. It's your big heel group. Ric Flair is your heel owner at this point. He's playing the owner of WCW, and he has a whole stable of guys, and they start getting attacked in the back, and you're thinking, oh, it's probably going to be Sting. This is how they're going to bring him back. And before that happens, WCW gets sold, and then the first time Sting officially comes back is the last Nitro when Flair comes out at the very end and says, my greatest opponent is Sting, I want to wrestle him tonight, and that is the last match that the real WCW ever had. I think you gotta exit here. Yep. I think we gotta exit this show.
Yeah, so that is the last of WCW.
That is literally the last of WCW. The last WCW match ever as its own company is Sting defeating Ric Flair on the last Nitro.
Now, why does the Sting jump ship and go to WWE here?
You'd have to ask him, but I think he always made really good money. He always was getting other opportunities. He was when he was doing the Crow thing for a while in the beginning, he was also shooting a movie. That was like a Turner movie. It was called like Shutter Speed. I think it was him and Daisy Fuentes. But I think he was always comfortable there, and he never felt the need to jump.
Yeah, it just seems weird. Like everyone's going there, and Sting just never bothered, never bit. It's always the question, people wondered like, why didn't he go WWE? And then we'll get into when he finally does, and he probably wishes he didn't.
Well, during the Attitude Era, it was we'll get to more of that on the second part.
Yeah.
For a while, it was because of content. And it was because Sting became a born-again Christian. He found God. He's a very religious man now. He had his demons in the 90s and early 2000s.
Well, wrestler didn't, right?
But, yeah, he kind of flipped that around a little bit. That's another story for another day.
Now, last thing before we close here. Did Sting ever have issues with copyrights with the movie and the character and the face paint?
No.
They never attacked it for it?
No, I don't believe so.
That's interesting. Interesting to hear. I never knew.
I don't know enough about the Crow. Maybe it was a New Line Cinema thing, and maybe Turner owned it.
Very possible.
But then again, he still uses it now.
Yeah.
And never had an issue with the singer Sting. I think Sting the wrestler might actually own the rights to the name, and the singer licenses it. I'm not sure how that works, but yeah, he's never had an issue with it. There's actually an old picture of the two together, like the singer Sting.
Yeah, because he didn't even. It was like everyone called it Crow Sting.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Well, they didn't officially call it Crow Sting, but yeah, that's what it was always called. Like wink, wink.
Yeah, it's weird. It's interesting. I never, well, especially with today's modern day, you try to do something like that, it's a nightmare. I'd imagine.
You could argue parody and stuff like that.
All right, well, that'll do it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for hanging out, and make sure you tune in for part 2, which will be coming very, very soon, where we discover stuff. Yeah, we talk about. I don't think it's this turn. That we talk about Sting. I think it's just a one lane. I think I just messed up.
I believe you did.
Yep. Well, we talk about Sting and Impact, and then going into WB as well as AEW later on in his career. Yeah, that guy's turn. That's what I was doing. I had a method to my madness. Yeah, so thank you guys so much. If you are here this long, make sure you follow on all social media, Anthony Blackwell Jr. You can also check out our Patreon, as well as...
We're not turning.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm just
This is a turn-only lane.
I'm getting this guy out of the way here. You can check out our Patreon. $1, $5, whatever you can do helps a long way and helps us grow the channel, helps pay for some bills, and we can use it to upgrade some cameras. This is my first test doing a night drive with the GoPro, and from what I've seen so far, it worked pretty well. I didn't have any issues with the GoPro. See, I have an older version of the GoPro, and it has issues where it freezes. No issues at all.
I think we're coming up with a parking lot now. This will be a good time to...
So we'll ride up. Brian, what do you want to plug? What do you got going on?
You can also go Murder My Dude. We have a new episode out where we review Halloween Kills. That's the next big episode we've got. And that's about it.
Awesome. We'll see you guys next time. For Anthony Blackwell for the History of Sting Part 1. We'll see you soon for Part 2.
Yes, we will.